Welcome to Scott F1, and today we are previewing the German Grand Prix 2019 at the Hockenheimring. Let's jump into it. So this circuit is drastically shorter than how I knew it growing up, with almost half of the circuit, mainly the forest section, no longer in use. But the circuit is still majorly reliant on straight line speed, retaining the style of long straights, now more similar to a track like, say, Monza. I can't imagine how the old track would have handled the current era of Formula 1 cars. Most likely the cars would focus on getting the best exit out of the few corners available to them, and then utilising DRS to make the overtake, leaving the spectators like ourselves missing out on the wheel-to-wheel racing that was given to us in Austria and laterally at Silverstone. Luckily for us, the Hockenheimring still has a nice, challenging technical section in Sector 3, and fingers crossed we'll see some good battles there, with lunges being made in the final turn before the home straight. Of course, due to the nature of the track, it will suit the cars with the more powerful engines and top-line speeds. I think Mercedes will be strong in the technical sections as well. They surprised us in Catalonia and surprised us in Monaco. The Mercedes car can now also reach its potential in low-speed corners, removing that Achilles heel that Red Bull and to a certain extent Ferrari hoped to exploit in the last couple of years. One crumb of hope for the neutral fan is that Hamilton and Bottas' dominance this season has not purely been from the chassis. We saw Ferrari in testing indicate that they might have had the stronger car. Mercedes' early season dominance came a lot from being a lot better with tyre temps. So if the track temperature is low and the rest of the field can look after their tyres in the few turns that exist on this track, then we could see some close racing. However, I predict Hamilton and Bottas to lock out the front two grid spots again. Personally, I'm going to tip Bottas to get pole, as there are rumours that Hamilton is setting up his car for race day rather than quali, so Bottas may just edge it, purely based on being able to run higher revs on the long straights. Ferrari and Red Bull next are up, and I think it'd be a similar story this weekend in the Ferrari garage. Leclerc will exchange top spot over the course of Saturday, before missing out to Mercedes, and I expect Verstappen in the Red Bull to comfortably take P4. And I'm interested to see how the Red Bull fares at this circuit with their Honda engine. The recent upgrade has also meant that they now mean business, and Max is no longer a frustrated figure in the paddock. He's really enjoying it out there. Now this is where it gets interesting. Gasly has had a bit of a second win now. He really needed to put in that strong Silverstone performance, and to do that with Helmut Marko hanging the sword of Damocles above his head. He showed great mental strength. He seems to have finally communicated with his engineers what he needs from the car, and he's starting to perform. 2 weeks is a long time in F1, and the spotlight has now firmly shifted from Gasly's performances to Vettel's mistakes. The F1 community sided with Vettel after his mistake in Canada, but the Silverstone incident with Max confirmed a lot of people's suspicions that Vettel has lost not just speed, but also racecraft. He's always had his racecraft critiqued, unfairly in my opinion. His championship wins were taken from the front of the pack, in the best car, but the sort of unbelievable consistency on the track it's deserted him, and the question is whether this is a result of his motivation for F1 also deserting him. So I'll run through the rest of the pack. So I expect a strong race from McLaren again, but perhaps not quite hitting the heights of previous races. They have an excellent underrated chassis, a nicely balanced car, but running a customer Renault engine, they may be taken on some of the straights. Lando Norris, he's impressed us all, and Sainz has really become his own man this year, and has risen to the challenge of his teammate, I think. It's a solid driver pairing, and it's no surprise that McLaren have confirmed them both for the 2020 season. Moving on to the Renault factory team, and I find it difficult to predict their performance this weekend. There's been an element of 2 steps forward, 1 step back for Renault all season. However, Ricciardo is squeezing everything out of the car to keep pace with the McLarens in the race, and I think he may just have the edge over the McLaren duo in this one. Hülkenberg unfortunately does not look suited to Renault's car this season. I think he's having a poor season by his own standards. Ricciardo's salary being released in the court proceedings of the dispute with his agent, it could potentially sour relations with the team. Hülkenberg's always been traditionally considered the number 1 driver, and with good reason. He saw off many of his previous teammates. But sadly for Nico, Daniel just finds his 10th of a second that Hülkenberg just can't at the moment. Now Haas. Where to begin? It's been a rough fortnight for the Haas team. It's difficult to imagine how the off-track sponsor issues, coupled with the on-track calamities, wouldn't affect a small team of 250 employees like Haas. The close-knit nature of the trackside crew and the factory has its advantages, but I feel the lack of resource also leaves them in a fragile state at crisis times like this. Regardless, I expect Haas to be strong in qualifying once again and fall away in the race again. I hate to say it, but I think it'll be curtains for Grosjean at the end of this weekend, unless he puts in a very strong showing. I think Bottas has convinced Toto that he deserves a Merc drive in 2020, and this leaves Toto with the urgent task of finding a long-term drive for Esteban Ocon, who's currently kicking his heels, itching to get back into a seat before the end of the season, and I think he'd jump at a chance to race at Haas. Sauber and Toro Rosso, they'll likely put in solid mid-table performances this race. Raikkonen, Albon and especially Kvyat, they've all shown themselves to be success stories at different races of the calendar, such as the closeness of Formula 1.5 this season. However, we have seen an upturn in pace from Giovinazzi, and if his car can stay reliable this weekend, I have a feeling he will be the pick of the bunch out of these 4 drivers this weekend. Quickly moving on to Racing Point, I think this will be another weak race for them. Every weekend that other cars improve, they fall further behind, waiting for those upgrades that are due in a couple of races' time. Hockenheim, I think, will be a grin and bear it moment for Perez and Stroll, and you'll unlikely see Stroll grinning this weekend. He's been visibly unhappy for most of the season, and he's clearly not comfortable in the car. Finally, Williams. They're still the slowest car on the grid by a fair distance, but the car looks like it's a lot nicer to handle, and they have seen off the early season accusations of how Williams would not make the 107% ruling if it still applied. Their upgrades, they've been modest but successful, with Russell, he's squeezing everything out of that car. Kubica, he just can't keep up with his teammate, and it's only exacerbated when you see the car does not match his driving style compared to how his teammate runs it. So I've been Scott F1, and I'd appreciate if you click subscribe if you'd like to hear more of this content, and don't forget to leave a like if you made it to the end. Enjoy the race.